Okay, so once again today we're talking about lenses. This is the 17-28 f2.8 from Tamron. It's also a Di3 RXD lens, whatever that means. Before we jump into my thoughts about the lens, I've just got to say a massive thank you to MPB for loaning me this lens. They've let me borrow it for a little bit so that I could make this review, and it wouldn't be possible without them, so a massive thank you to them. This isn't a sponsored video, but they did loan me this lens. So in order to check this lens out, I took it down to Bath for the weekend to kind of run it through its paces, take some videos, take some photos, and give it a good test run. And I've got to say, I'm very impressed with the results. I'm now currently sat on one of the best views, I think, in the whole of the UK. Just looking over the entire city of Bath. It is absolutely beautiful. The light is still pretty high, so it's probably not the optimal conditions, but I'm not going to be staying too late because I've got to go 2.5 hours all the way back home. Okay, so the Tamron 17-28 is a very interesting lens, and a lens that I've been looking at for a while, and I think a lot of people have considered this lens over the last few years that it's been out. It's no new lens over the 16-35 f2.8 G Master, and there's a few reasons for that. Obviously you get this much wider field of view, it's really nice. This is right at 17mm, and it's kind of a more vlog style lens, if you want to call it that, for video. It's brilliant for vlogs because you've got a nice wide field of view. Firstly, what is great about this lens is the fact that it's small, it's compact. Some of the other lenses in this category, such as the Sony 16-35 f2.8, are pretty massive lenses. They are not small by any means, and they're certainly not discreet. And when it comes to vlogging, a lot of the time people may be a little bit self-conscious about filming in public, or they just don't want to draw a ton of attention to themselves. So having a more compact, smaller setup is not only nice for your arms because it's not as heavy. This lens only weighs 420 grams, but it's also a little bit less obnoxious, I guess. It has a 67mm thread distance, which I think is a pretty standard one. It's the same as my Sigma 28-70 that I reviewed in my last video. Go check that out if you haven't already. This lens just does the basic things really, really well. And, you know, it doesn't come with a number of fancy switches or, you know, anything that, in fact, there's no switches on the barrel at all. However, sometimes I think I'd rather have the basics done well rather than, you know, all these extra gizmos. And I can't believe I actually said gizmos. I'm a young person. I can't walk and talk. I'm out of breath. No other additional switches or buttons or anything like that. However, is it something I massively miss? Not really. I'm not someone that uses the buttons and switches on the lens all that much. I could easily do without them. Some people love them, but it's not one of my personal absolute must-haves when it comes to the lens. Something that's interesting on this lens, and a little bit different to a lot of the lenses that we see out there, many zooms have external zooms, extending barrels when you zoom in and out. This lens doesn't have that. When you zoom in, you'll be able to hopefully see this. The internal barrel, I'm going to cover my eyes so it doesn't eye track me. The internal barrel of the lens actually moves, which is a very interesting solution, and I think it helps with the weather sealing of this lens. It's great because also if you have a filter on the front, then you're just going to stop all water or, you know, dust or whatever getting onto like the internal bits of the lens, which can be a concern for some of those lenses, the zoom lenses that zoom in and out. You get moisture, you can get dust in there, and then, you know, it might end up to, you know, fungus or whatever growing in your lens. That is something I hope to never experience. One thing I do want to mention, because not many lenses in this price packet do actually have, and this lens does have, is very good weather sealing. There's a good weather sealing gasket around the mounting point, which is good, and we don't see that on many lenses in this price bracket. So that's really nice to see. That's a good touch from Tamron. I think every lens should be weather sealed. And then the internal zoom obviously helps a lot more with weather sealing because you haven't got a protruding barrel. So that is really good to see as well. It's nice to see lenses in this price bracket have good weather sealing. That's not something that we always get to see. For example, my Sigma 28-70 doesn't have that, and I think that's one of the major downsides of that lens. But this does seem to be well weather sealed. Of course, I didn't test it. This is a lone lens. I'm not going to absolutely batter it. One thing I did notice this morning, whoa. So let's talk about the performance of the lens, the most important part. Whatever it looks like, the weight, the size, that is one part, but it's not really the most important. You want to know about the quality, you want to know about how the autofocus works. So let's dive into that. Firstly, let's talk about the image quality. I've got to be honest, it's absolutely brilliant. I wouldn't be expecting anything more from this lens. It's tack sharp all the way through the range. F2.8 is very crisp and looks great. On wider lenses, you do tend to get less of that kind of blurry background as you have much less compression. But from the images I've taken with this lens, for both in photo and video, it looks great. You still get a fairly blurry background when you're kind of filming yourself in that vlog style, which many people will use this lens for, and I've been very impressed. I have no issues with the kind of image quality out of this lens. I think it's top notch, and I would be very interested to see how much better the 16-35 is in comparison to this. But yeah, I don't know what more I would want from this lens. It's just tack sharp and really, really impressive, especially at this price point. So one thing that Tamron does mention about this lens is this like RXD kind of tag that they've got on it, and that stands for Rapid Extra Silent Stepping Drive, which is to do with the autofocus system. One thing I did notice this morning when I was out taking photos, the autofocus system is very quick, it's very fast, and it is very accurate. I didn't really have any problems with focusing, even in pretty harsh lighting conditions, like, you know, kind of midday. It was, sun is beaming down, and, you know, it can be quite difficult for lenses to focus with all that contrast. But this lens was focusing brilliantly. Of course, that's helped by the A7 Mark IV, but it wasn't slow, it was responsive every time, and I haven't had any problems with that in that sense. In video as well, it's been very accurate, it's been very quick to focus. At the moment I've got my eye tracking on and it seems to be working very well from what I can tell, which is always positive to see. It's completely silent, you won't be hearing any noise, which again is brilliant for video shooters. This lens just does the basic things really, really well. Everyone's using autofocus more and more these days because the systems have got so good. So when you can rely on one and it just works, that's really nice, and it's like creatively freeing for people who are using the lens, because you don't have to worry about, you know, is it going to hit focus, or is it going to be loud? Am I going to have to go into post and get rid of all this annoying sound? No, got to worry about none of that. And that is a massive pro for me. I think it's brilliant. Tamron have done a great job on that. As far as I'm aware, this lens isn't stabilized. However, at 17mm with the active stabilization on the Sony A7 IV, I haven't experienced any problems with that. I'm walking down a hill right now. The wider lenses are much easier to stabilize, so I'm hoping that this is pretty steady. I've got active stabilization turned on the A7 IV, and I'm just handheld. I'm not really walking very well because we all know that walking down hills is possibly the least graceful thing you can do. Okay, so at the moment it's all been absolute positives, but I do have to come in with one minor thing, and it may be more of a factor for some people than others depending on what other lenses you have in your kit. The one thing that may just put people off buying this lens is the zoom range. It's 17 to 28. Why it's 16 I don't know, like that seems to be the standard, but 17 it is. There's really not that much difference between the two. That's not really the problem, but the fact is it only goes up to 28, and that's only 11mm in range, and that's not a whole lot. So if you're looking for that lens that is the most versatile vlogging lens in terms of actual range, a 16 to 35 still offers you a lot more in terms of, you know, if you do need to punch in for some shots. That could be an issue for some people. For me personally, I wouldn't say it's the biggest problem in the world because of my other lenses. It's not a major problem, but you may realize that you need a bit more range within that one lens, because 11mm in range isn't a whole lot in terms of zoom, and there are other lenses out there on the market that can offer you more. But in my opinion, is it worth spending that much more on some of the other lenses around for that extra bit of zoom, that's what you've got to weigh up. I would 100% recommend this lens if you're in the market for a wide angle zoom. It definitely has the capabilities that some of those higher lenses have, except for the zoom, but it's in a more compact, more discreet body that's more lightweight, and actually I think some of the pros may even outweigh the pros of those more expensive lenses. So it's certainly a lens you should consider if you're weighing up the options here in the kind of wide zoom angle market. I said here, the market isn't like here, it's like around, if that even makes any sense. But it's an absolutely great lens, and yeah, massive thank you to MPB for loaning it to me. I plan to go out and do a POV London photography with it, to kind of test out my wide angle photography, which is something I haven't really done that much in the past, but I think that'll be an exciting video, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that, and hit the like if you did enjoy this video. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.